Erin Thomas,
Yes.
welcome to Alice Down Under.
Thank you for inviting me. This is awesome. I love the space. We've already had the pleasure of chatting about this. This is just great. It's awesome.
I hope a lot of people get to see it.
Yes.
I have, as far as I can tell, a wonderful life. Lexington's been good to me.
There you go.
So, cheers.
Cheers.
Let's see how the world comes out.
Pretty yummy at this point right there. Very nice.
So, I guess I'll start with, what do you do for a living? Where are you today?
Where am I
Rather
today?
than the, hey, where'd you come from?
Right.
Where are we today?
Today. So, I'm a certified athletic trainer. I work in the industrial setting, made it there through a couple other avenues of athletic training, and that's what I do is kind of my predominant job. So you find me a lot at Schneider Electric doing stuff with manufacturing engineers and the safety team, trying to help keep people safe and prevent injuries, whether it's on the job or whether it's at home because you twisted your ankle playing pickup basketball or whatever. So I do a lot of that. It's a lot of fun from injury prevention standpoint to again, just redesigning stuff. It kind of plays into that aspect as well, and getting to work with a lot of different people all over.
Do you work with a lot of individuals, or you said working with a lot of companies? Are you
So I have a primary
part of plans,
home.
or are you part of actually injury rehab and things?
So my company is Ergo Plus. So we are a national company, but we have different clients. So kind of my primary home is Schneider Electric. I'm there several days a week, and then I have another client up in Blythewood that I'll bounce into occasionally as well. I've flown up to Pennsylvania, I've flown out to Texas to do things like that for individuals, depending on what their need is. If they want to redesign complete manufacturing lines and make it more user-friendly, whether you're 4'9" or 5'11" or 6'9", and depending on repetition and depending on all these other things that make the world go around in the manufacturing facility, we're there to help facilitate that, to make it as user-friendly as we can, within certain means, of course. And then at the same time, though, we can be like kind of brief in and out for that, or be more integrated into where we're there on a daily basis, to where, hey, Erin, my shoulder's been bugging me for the last couple weeks. It's specifically from this workstation, or I just went and was pulling on a chainsaw because a tree blew down in my yard and now my shoulder's killing me. So we try to prevent people from having to miss time at work, and then just be the best selves they can be on a daily basis. So we get integrated kind of however our client wants us to be, which is really fun. And it's different because you get to meet tons of different people from all over, especially working for an international company too, which is kind of cool.
I would imagine if you're working with these people and you're helping them feel better, they're glad to see you.
Most of the time, yeah. Most of the time.
They may not be happy to see you initially because they're
Right.
like, oh, I don't like the fact that I'm sore or whatever. And some of them probably don't know why.
Right, and a lot of, I have a huge orthopedic background in athletic training. A lot of our background is ortho. So we always like to say, like, usually when you meet people when they're not feeling their best. I mean, they're not their best self. Before I got where I was at now, I did a lot of casting and bracing, so I met a lot of people when they were beat up and banged up and broken and just hurting, and we're not our best selves. But the point is to keep putting things in place to get better a little bit every step of the way, every day by day, and also to be a sounding board too, to say, yes, this is completely normal. This is where we're going, this is the direction we're going in, and to try to be and give honest feedback. I think that's one of the things I enjoy too about being part of Ergo Plus is we work for certain companies, but we're our own independent entity. So I get the opportunity to, I'm honest with the employer, I'm honest with the employee, because I'm an advocate for both, because I want both to have the best outcome possible.
How much of it is educating, and how much of it is actual, let's say, rehab, and how much of it is identifying potential problems that are, let's say, prevention? It's like, I see this short person over here, and they're going to have their arms a little bit higher, which is going to torque their shoulder a little bit more. And when they're doing this stuff, it's going to be a lot harder. Yet for the tall person, maybe they're slouched down a little bit too much, and they don't know that they're going to have a back issue in a year.
Honestly, I would say 40% of what I do is like the proactive, like education piece. And then I would split the rest up 30-30. And some of the proactive education piece is also teaching people just in general, like basic stretching. Like we do warm-up stretchings at our plant, the two plants that I service here in the area. They do It's between 5 to 5.5 minutes. Total body warm-up stretching at the beginning of every shift to get loose and limber, to prepare your body for what you're about to do, because it's a physical activity. I call them industrial athletes. Or workplace athletes, because truly when you look at what some people do in that setting, they don't see, like, if you're sitting here and you're in a fabrication department and you keep, shaking material out and this and that, it's taxing. It's different things that you do every single day. And it works your body. So a lot of what I do is the education piece and buying in for a lot of stretching or just body maintenance or hydration and sleep. And talk about recovery and what that looks like, and that's that recovery fatigue balance. So that's a huge part, and that also empowers associates. For example, I had to do assessments across our entire plant, but I give associates a voice and an opportunity. Sometimes I say that my associates are my best ergonomists, because I sit there and I take video of what they're doing. And I can get an hour and a half video that I spend time with them, but I can't get every single variation of what's happening. So I go to them and I ask them, and I said, hey, if you could change something about this, or is there something that you're doing that is more challenging than this specific application? I give them a voice and give them an opportunity to be a part of a solution as well, and can bring, my manufacturing engineer in, bring people from the safety team in, and we take a kind of a collective look to try to improve it and try to make it better. And granted, we try to do that before an injury occurs and before something becomes an issue. So I think that's nice, to be the education piece on the front end about just your physical health and body, but then also proactive into where you give people a voice, which I think is tremendous, giving people an opportunity to feel like they're part of a solution, especially when they're an employee and they're also bought into that. I think that can give them a lot of power as well.
So you mentioned workplace athletes, and I thought that was kind of a kind of a cool way to think of that. Is that something that you've kind of applied, or is that?
So actually, a lot of companies that are in the position we are within Ergo Plus, there's other companies out there that do what we do. That has kind of become like a normal standard for the way we refer to associates in the manufacturing setting.
Because a lot of these people, especially if they're guys, you know where you're going to find them after work?
In the gym.
In the gym.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they're like, yeah, I go to the gym because I'm working out because A, they like to do it.
Right.
And B, they're like, well, I need to stay in shape because I have a job. Maybe they're doing concrete or something for a living, and they're just taxing themselves. And if they weren't doing that, they would be doing something else athletic.
Yeah.
So I was watching something about some guys in a distillery, and they were raking grain.
Yes.
They were doing floor malting.
Very physical work. I can understand that. Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, this is like going to the gym all day, every day.
Yes.
And for some people, they would think that'd be great. My wife would be, she'd be one of them.
Yeah.
She was like, yeah, she's never met a gym she didn't like to go into.
Yeah. And yeah, a lot of folks do have that mentality. And one of the facilities I'm at, they actually have a wellness center there. And trust me, during lunch times, during break times, it is always full. After shift, for the first 45 minutes when, first shift gets off, it's always full. And they're always in there working out. And yeah, and it's one of those things, even several people, like I know several other people have different jobs, secondary jobs. And some of them, one guy I know, he does mechanic work for his brother on the weekend. Very physical. One other guy works at a feed store, moving, 60, 70, 80-pound bags of feed around. So even if it's depending on what they're doing here at the location that I'm servicing, it could also be what else they're doing outside. And sometimes me educating them about what they should do, like even doing 5 minutes worth of stretching before you get your shift started, even when you're not just at this company, do that before your other job. That's still going to help you feel better. It's going to help cut down on the chance of you getting injured, and that's what it's about.
So how much of your background in your education is just anatomy oriented versus like a medical background? I mean, obviously you don't have a medical degree, I don't think.
So I'm a certified athletic trainer, and that actually is a medical degree.
Okay.
It is.
Yeah. Stand me up and correct me.
No, you're good. Yeah. So we have our own set of boards that we have to sit for.
So, but the certification is not like I can just go for 12 weeks at the local training center.
Right.
This is This is a certification that comes after a degree.
Yes, yes. So when I went through the program, I had to go through a mandatory approved specific program for 4 years. That was an undergraduate degree that met certain standards. And I also had to do clinical rotations, X amount of clinical rotations, X amount of hours that had different specific contact points on it, if you will. Now, a couple years after I graduated, I say a couple, that's been a long time ago, about 10 years after I graduated and had been a certified athletic trainer, it has now changed to where now you get your undergraduate in, some kind of related field, biology or exercise science, and now it's a master's level. But you still have the same certain contact hours, and you still have your board of certification and continuing education. And then we are also now, each state has its own regulation, so we're not only nationally certified, we're also certified within the state that's under the licensure board, just the same way physical therapists are.
Beyond diagnosing what might be a problem if somebody injures themselves, can you prescribe anything other than, what are your limitations?
Right.
Or what?
So
what can you
every
do?
state has different limitations depending on how they recognize certified athletic trainers. In the state of South Carolina, we have to practice under a supervising physician, if you will. Now, my setting specifically, my husband is also an athletic trainer, just like I am, completely different setting. He has different flexibilities than I do because my setting being in the manufacturing setting, OSHA has a much stronger hold there. So actually when you referenced like rehab, we don't do rehab in my setting, we do injury prevention exercises. So I can give you a sheet for your shoulder that'll have 4 different stretches and 7 different exercises on it. But I'll be giving that sheet to you as well as associate B, C, and D. I can't customize anything. So it's a little bit different in my setting just because of the way things are governed because of OSHA. So that's kind of the uniqueness of it. I have colleagues that work in the military, and they have the ability to say, oh, your shoulder needs an MRI, so they can send somebody under that to get an MRI. So it kind of just depends on kind of where you fall under and how you're recognized to do that. But yes, it does continue to evolve.
So if I see athletic trainers on the sidelines at Gamecocks game or something,
Exactly.
These are, generally speaking, medical professionals.
They are, yes. They are. Unfortunately, the situation that happened with Damar Hamlin last year, the NFL football player, that's what made a lot of people recognize, athletic trainers, and some people get confused with our name. They just think of us as personal trainers, people that you see in your local gym. And this is what we do. No, like we are actually healthcare professionals that have a heavy orthopedic background, and we have a lot of background in just general medical as well. And I do a ton of general medical actually where I'm at. That's one of the things that I really brushed up on again when I got into the setting. I see a lot of general medical stuff, from blood pressure to diabetic issues to just other general health issues. And that's something, my husband sees a little bit of that in his setting, which is different, but that's something that's very unique to my setting and the way I function. So athletic trainers are very versatile, which is great, and we're a really great liaison sometime between a next step of a physician and then not having anybody else. We can help guide that person. So, yeah.
So you spent 4 years in school for this plus?
Yeah, and so when I graduated from the University of South Carolina, go Cox. Although we're struggling this year, Lord help us. Anyway,
I recall seeing a Clemson game last night that was. Didn't go so well for them either.
Yeah, I'm telling you, the entire state of South Carolina is on the struggle bus this year, I think, for football. But yeah, so I went to USC, 4-year degree, graduated, set for my boards, became a certified athletic trainer. My first job was with the University of Tennessee, and that's when, in Knoxville, and that's when they had a men's and women's athletic department, and I was hired into the women's athletic department, and I was the assistant athletic trainer for women's volleyball up there. And then while I was up there working, I got my master's degree in sports psychology up there. So that's where I went from there. And at the time, it was not required to get a master's degree, but at the time, I think something like 50 to 60% of us were going on to get additional education and just additional experience in some form or fashion. So not only do I wear Gamecock Garnet, I wear Tennessee Vol Orange a lot. So yeah.
Sometimes those probably don't mix.
They don't. It's very much separated in my closet.
So I went to a Division III school up in northern New York, and they actually played basketball very well up there.
Okay.
They won the national championship '86, I think. And I might have won it sometime time before that. They had like the nation's longest home winning streak behind the UCLA men's basketball team.
Right.
I think they had like a 56 game home winning streak. Where I went to school, I think they were at 52 or 53 or something. And it's in the absolute nowhere in northern New York. You're closer to the North Pole than you are in New York City, which might have something to do with the reason I don't live up that place anymore. But the thing that always amazed me was that I was never that attracted to college sports. It didn't matter to me. It wasn't. I'm from Western New York, so if, you're either a Buffalo Bills fan or a Buffalo Sabres fan or something like that. Or maybe you're a Yankees fan or something in baseball. Although I'm sure I've probably just pissed off half the state of New York. But when I moved down to the South, I moved down to South Florida.
Okay.
And even down there, South Florida especially, is just another part of New York, except for the tip of the bottom of it, which is just another part of Cuba. You have to get up into North Florida to get to the South. I moved to Louisville, Kentucky for a year, and the first day on the job up there, I was offered a name tag with a lanyard and asked, do you want a blue one or a red one? And it didn't take me long to figure out, oh, you mean like the University of Louisville Cardinals or the UK Wildcats. I'm like, I'm in Louisville, I'll take red. And from then on, and then we moved here, a couple of years after that, and it's...
Yeah.
So it amazes me when I meet people who've been to two different schools.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do you do that? Because there's some hardcore people out there.
People give me a really hard time about it sometimes. Like, if Carolina's playing the University of Tennessee for any reason, they're like, who are you pulling for? And I'm like, honestly, I sit on my hands. I mean, I want both schools to do well. I want both of them to succeed. Being in the medical field, and what my husband does, my husband is on an athletic sideline still. I was on a sideline for a while and then transitioned out, and he stayed on the sidelines. I have always said, at the end of the night, it doesn't make a difference what the scoreboard is. Granted, I would always want my team to win, but to me, who wins and loses is also about who stays healthy and who's not injured. So that's kind of how I rack it up. I want every single athlete to be playing in postseason and to do well. But yeah, I mean, I pull for my balls hard. I pull for my Gamecocks hard. I sit on my hands when they play. So yeah, I'm pretty honest about that one.
That part about the South has always been fascinating to me. Just the dedication that people have to their university. And
it was interesting because when I was up in Tennessee, and that's actually how I met my husband, he was working for the University of Tennessee as well. And so I met him actually just before I moved up there. I met him when I was actually visiting someone else up there and up there interviewing, and he had nothing to do with that process. I just kind of met him on a whim. And then lo and behold, I move up to Tennessee, and then he was getting another job, and he gets a job in South Carolina next to the town I grew up in. So we did, long distance for a little bit longer and all that good stuff. But then I came back from the University of Tennessee, and my job back in South Carolina was working for the University of South Carolina, and I was the assistant athletic trainer for women's softball, and then oversaw a graduate assistant for women's volleyball. So, I mean, I got a paycheck from both institutions, and I have a degree from both institutions hanging on my wall. So, I can't be mad at either one of them. And I mean, I met my husband in the midst of all of it too. So
it's obviously served you well.
It did.
So
and
congrats.
All the people you meet along the way and the friends you make. I mean, that's part of what makes it amazing. So
I understand you played some golf.
I did.
If I have the story correct, you played for the University of South Carolina?
I did. So when I went to school, I had a couple different schools I was looking at, and I came from a small school here in South Carolina for high school, and I just kind of wanted to be a part of something that was bigger. And a couple places fit the bill, but USC just really felt like home. And I went in, I had a golf scholarship, and played golf there. Intended on playing for all 4 years. It didn't kind of work out that way, but I had still some great memories, and actually I was part of the 2002 SEC championship team for women's golf, which was awesome. That was the first in history, and we actually held for several years the lowest round. Had some great teammates that played on that team. So yeah, and then basically golf and knowing what I wanted to do for a living weren't jiving quite as well as I'd like to, just because of the clinical rotations and the requirements, and I knew I had to make a decision. And it was are you going to end up making golf your career, or are you going to end up making athletic training, your career? And that's what part of the reason you came to the University of South Carolina, because they had the program. So I made the decision to make, athletic training my focus.
I think a lot of people have that situation. I had that same thing with me, because the school I went to had a very good computer science program, which is why I went there. But they also have a world-renowned music school. And as a musician, that was somewhat, it's not why I chose it, but it was there, and I was participating in the ensembles and doing all right, and I basically had that choice. You're going to be a musician, or you're going to be punching a keyboard every day. And I realized that I'm going to go hungry if I decide to be a musician, and I say, you know what, I'll keep that as a hobby, and I'll do this for a living.
And that's what I figured out. I could play golf for as long as I wanted to, and I worked at a golf course for several years in high school and even in college. I could always have it as a hobby. It'll always be there.
So where do you play around here?
I really don't play anymore. Life got busy. When I did play, I played a lot at Country Club of Lexington. Also played a lot at Golden Hills, and I have to admit, when I was at the University of South Carolina, it was the University Club. It changed to Cobblestone Park. I still love that course to this day. I'm lucky that I have some friends that live up in Blythewood that do have access to that course. So if I really got the itch to play, I could call them and we could get on. But it's sad to say I have not picked up a club in about a year and a half.
Year and a half. It's been like 8 years probably since I swung.
But yeah, I mean, but still, again, I still have friends that I keep up with. I mean, one of my teammates is now the head golf coach for the women's golf program at Ole Miss. They hold an SEC title under her. I'm still good friends with my former head coach that lives in Blythewood, the assistant coach that doesn't live too far away, who's the director of South Carolina women's golf. I mean, I have people out in Texas. I follow other friends that are on the LPGA that were teammates. And it's great to see them thriving so well in golf, even though my path was different.
How big is the chasm between you and them, do you think?
Oh, I don't
Golf has been an interesting thing. I've played a lot of golf, and I've got a decent swing. I suck at the game.
Yeah.
But I've had so many lessons taught to me on the golf course where you go, oh, there's a subtle yet huge difference between, the weekend guy and the tour players and even the minor tour players. There's got to be you've got to have a great experience someplace where you're like, oh, here's...
Yeah, there's a big difference. I mean, the dedication level. I mean, I know the hours, even in high school, because my goal was to get a scholarship to go to college, so I knew that was my way to get out and kind of go in the direction I needed to go. When everybody else was having fun on Saturdays and Sunday afternoons, I mean, when I literally say you're at the golf course at 8 or 9 in the morning and you were there until 6 or 7 at night and you weren't having the fun that all your friends were having, and it was it wasn't just fun going to play 18 holes. I mean, you're on the driving range and you're working on technical stuff, and you're on a plane board or you're on video, making sure your left arm's to your right shoulder, making sure you're not opening your hips, working on these crazy shots out of the bunker that you'll never think you're going to have. But also it's working on the mental aspect, putting yourself in situations that, again, that's part of what brought me to sports psychology for my master's, but the mental aspect of golf, you can do so much physically, and golf changed drastically. I feel like at some point in the 90s, it wasn't just the casual game. It became, golf, you need flexibility. You also need the strength. And you saw golfers and tennis players in the weight room.
I think there was a guy named Tiger Woods that had something to do with that.
Probably did.
I think people realized, well, wait a minute, there's that big chasm between where I think I'm good and holy cow, I'm not. You got humbled.
It's the dedication part, and seeing several of my teammates go on and do well. And there's also a difference in some of them. I've seen some great players that have gone on to play on the tour, that are just phenomenal and outstanding. And had, like, again, some of them are my former teammates, but I've also seen people that just, they have an eye and they have a knack for people. And those are some of the people that go on to be phenomenal PGA pros at your country clubs that can teach people, but they're also phenomenal coaches in college, that they can motivate and they can relate still. And that's tremendous. And the impact that, it just depends on what avenue. It just, whether you're a tour player, that you have a young girl watching you and say, I want to be like my former captain and teammate, Christy McPherson. I want to be like Christy McPherson one day. Or whether you're like Corey Thompson, I forgot what her married name is right now, but she's at Ole Miss, phenomenal college golfer in her own right. But she has a way of just relating to her college athletes and building them up. It's great to see the success they've had.
It's phenomenal how much of a mental game it is.
It's wonderful. And I mean, and people up in Morris Pickens, who's now I think in Florida, he's a phenomenal golf mind, and that's what he's done for a career, is help people with their mental game. And honestly, when I was working in the college setting, even in, just regular everyday athletics, rehab, so much of why I wanted to get my master's in sports psychology was because of when you come back from an injury, yes, there's a physical component, and I can give you all the printouts.
Right, but you're afraid of doing the same thing again.
Yes, and it's the mental aspect of that, and it's also becoming motivating that person to do it again, and how can you trust this, and how can you do it? And that was something that I was able to take advantage of with a couple athletes up at the Tennessee when I was getting my master's up there, doing their rehabs and doing things with them to try to make sure that they were their best. Because sometimes I truly believe, and I haven't, I didn't go on to do any studies on this. There might be some out there now. I've never looked it up. I truly believe that sometimes re-injury occurs not because there's a deficit in the rehabilitated limb, but because mentally there was questions. I think that's so strong.
The first time you hit a tree root,
my 7-iron went flying down, like the club head, went flying down the fairway. Yes.
yeah. You, from that day forward, never play the same around a tree root.
No, your hands are shaking. I didn't have a 7-iron for the last 12 holes, and I'm like, how am I going to do this? Yeah.
Yeah, it's I played a course way back years ago down in South Florida. It's Aberdeen. It was Aberdeen Country Club. Guy I was working for, I think he was probably a resident there. And he's like, yeah, we're going to go play Aberdeen. It's a ridiculously hard course. At least as far as I was concerned, it was. And this was before I got even reasonably good at the game.
Right.
And I never got even reasonably good, so whatever. But nonetheless, I'm basically hacking around. And I don't know, 15th hole or something like that. It's a par 4. But it's a huge dog leg. It's got to be, I'll bet it's 450 yards, which is a ridiculously long par 4. But there's an island in the water that the dog leg goes around. And if you got, let's say, chutzpah, you go for the island. I don't. Didn't matter. I easily scored a 12 on the hole. Right. It was pathetic. But anytime I'd come across something like that, I was so intimidated by that kind of thing. And it's, I think I played the PGA National course down in West Palm once in a weekend tournament or some nonsense.
And that's a beautiful course.
It is. But there's magnets in the water, and there's magnets in the balls. So it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter which direction the wind is blowing. Your ball's heading for the water. Every time. That's
one of the things we always said. Everybody would repeat in mantras for golf. If they had to hit over this, the lake or whatever, they would say, "Don't hit it in the water." Well, all your brain hears is "hit it in the water." It doesn't hear the "don't." So it's honestly just taking that portion out of it. But that's hard to do. It's human instinct.
Right.
It's human instinct.
And it's all the stuff you're putting on the green. It's like, well, the green always goes toward the water. Really?
Yes.
I can see the hill going this way. Doesn't matter. It's going to,
Yeah.
So how would you compare Lexington Country Club and Golden Hills. I've played them both.
Oh.
I was a social member for many years over at Lexington, so I got to play that quite often. But
Yeah, now I have to admit, I have a lot more reps at Country Club of Lexington than I do Golden Hills, just because when I played golf for Gilbert High School, Country Club of Lexington was our home course. And that's also where I worked golf carts and driving range, so I got to walk that course.
when were you there?
For high school?
Yeah, when were you there, working there or whatever? 'Cause
Okay, so I was there pretty much my entire high school career, and I graduated from Gilbert High School in spring of 2001.
Okay, so we didn't get here until 2004. I was going to suggest maybe there might have been some overlap.
So the
but maybe
only
around
overlap
to
would have been I did come back to Country Club of Lexington during Christmas break and during summer break for all of my college, pretty much until I graduated in spring of '05, and I moved directly up to Tennessee in May. I did come back to relieve some of the full-time employees, and I would still work because the pros there were fantastic and remembered me and let me come back and do that. So we might have crossed over. You never know.
My probably the most eye-opening experience I've had on the golf course was the first hole at Lexington Country Club.
Yeah. Slight left over the pond.
Pond didn't come into play.
Okay.
I showed up on my own, which I did quite often at the time. I was just going to go and walk 9 holes because it's a lot of fun to do, and it was cheap and weekday or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, I get there, and there's a couple other guys ahead of me or whatever, and they said, yeah, go join these 2 guys in the first hole. You can go play with them. It's like, all right, I'm not a really big guy. So, and I'm not that great a golfer, but, go walking out there, hi, how are you, whatever. And I don't know who these 2 guys are. They look like pretty athletic kind of guys. And so I didn't go to the driving range. I didn't go to the putting green.
Yeah.
I'm cold, car, pro shop, blue
First tee.
tees
Okay.
on the first tee.
There you go.
And they're like, hey, you go ahead. You go first. And I'm like, really? I don't know you guys. I haven't swung a club. So I'm like, all right, whatever. I tee the ball up. I take a couple of practice swings just for shits and giggles.
Yeah.
I hit, honestly, probably the best drive I've ever hit. This thing went down the middle of the fairway, slight draw to the left. It was just shy of the sand trap.
Okay.
The sand trap
Yes,
on the right-hand side.
On the right-hand side, right, kind of where that slight angle is, yes.
I am just shy of that. I am smack dab in the middle of the fairway. I'm like, oh my God, do you know how many balls I've put onto Bar Road? I have lost balls in the rough going over toward the water over there. I am now sitting there in the middle of the fairway, and I'm thinking to myself, just, shut up. But I said something like, I said, it's only going to go downhill from here. I said, that's the best drive I've ever had. Oh my God. It's like, so one of the other guys gets up, he hits his drive. Honestly, I don't know where it went. Third guy gets up. He's in his socks. He pulls out a 3-wood. He doesn't use a tee. He smokes it 50 yards past me. The best looking swing I think I've ever seen. I'm like, oh my God. He just something about the way he, was up on his toes as he was coming through. I'm like, oh my God.
All that power generated right there.
Look at that. Now, unfortunately for him, he drives it through the dogleg a little bit. There's a couple bushes up there. What, 30 yards past the sand trap? On the right-hand side?
Yeah.
He's under the bushes. I'm like, ha. Guy tells me, the second guy, he says, yeah, he's a touring pro on one of the mini tours. I don't know what the mini tours were at the time.
Right.
But he was on one of the mini tours. And I'm like, oh. Now, he's apparently local, and he'd been playing there for a long time. If I went and looked him up, and people there knew him. Or
Right.
I talked to somebody afterward, and they're like, oh, yeah, that was so-and-so. We always have him on our club team or something. I'm like, wow, this guy is. So I get up there. I hit my second shot someplace near the green. I'm near the green in 2. It's a par 5. So I'm like, well, I'm doing pretty good. I can chip it on and 2-putt for a par or something. Start my day, and I'm feeling really good about myself. Hit a decent ball. He pulls out, I don't know, 4 or 5 iron or whatever it was from the distance he was hitting it, crushes it from under the bushes, flies the green, probably 10 yards. We get up there. He chips it up 8 feet from the pin. Now, the first green up there is huge. I mean, you could put a whole wedding party on this green. The place is massive. Basically flat. He missed the par putt, or his birdie putt, from 8 feet. I said, all right, so here's what the lesson I learned. The difference between me and a minor touring pro is what he did on that drive with no tee and a 3-wood and no shoes. The difference between him and the PGA Tour is he missed that 8-foot birdie putt.
Exactly. And honestly, on the tour, short game, up and downs, I mean, anybody will tell you that. That's what makes it. If you can scramble, I mean, in college it was the same way.
Yeah, I'm like, I got a good swing. I can't be that far away from the tour. Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
It's that short game, man. It's the things that you think are unmakeable. You can't get out of this. Oh, there's no way. Then they find a way, and you're like, okay, what's the difference?
Yeah, and that was the other thing about Lexington, when the country club, when we moved here and I played out there, I hadn't played a course like that before.
And you came in to Country Club of Lexington after they came in and overhauled all the greens. Because number 5 coming back to Lexington, that came back to the clubhouse.
The elevated one.
The green was literally like a huge angle. Oh. Like you would hit it and it would just.
So you didn't have that big stadium bowl or whatever you want to call behind.
And they came back in and there was, and I don't like I said, I was working there and they came in and redid all the greens. And I remember number 5, they came in from that huge, tremendous angle. I don't even know what it was, and literally flattened it. So you come up the hill and it's flat. The Country Club of Lexington has always rolled quick. Their greens always roll quick, and it's been forever since I played there, but I'm assuming they still roll quick. That was a signature, which I loved. And the reason I liked that is, for me, it was always easier to transition to a golf course coming from Country Club of Lexington, going anywhere else that we played, in high school or junior tournament season during the summer and fall season. To me, it would have been harder to go from me always crushing the ball on the putting green to trying to tap it. It was easier to go from, okay, I can tap it, to where I can actually hit it, because these greens are rolling so slow. I was lucky. I mean, University Club, Cobblestone Park, now they always run pretty quick too. So that really was a nice transition and felt like home when I went from Country Club of Lexington to the University Club.
I could never read the greens though. I didn't care if I was 8-10 feet away. My only objective, I think this was something my dad told me when I was a kid. He's like, just imagine a bushel basket over the hole. Just leave it inside the bushel basket.
Getting a 2.5 foot circle.
Right.
Yep. But
you got to tap in.
The best pros still do that too. I mean, that's the thing is, the difference is we have a 3 or a 2.5 foot bushel basket. The pros are looking for a 1 foot circle or an 8-inch circle around it. But half the time they just make it in the hole.
I know, it's disgusting.
It's crazy. Some of the amazing putts. It's awesome.
I always like playing over there at Lexington. The course itself is, it doesn't feel like it's squeezed into things. Mm-mm. I played a lot in South Florida, and you're playing condo golf in a lot of places where the fairway goes down between massive condo buildings, and you could hit a ball, shank it off to the right, bounces off the condo, and it's in the middle of the fairway, and it's good. You're like, hey, look at that, I'm in the middle of the fairway. But I learned a bunch of lessons down there too, playing a bunch of old guys, because in Florida, it's heaven's waiting room. Yep. And
they'll hustle you.
There is nothing like having an old guy with a 5-iron. He's got 2 clubs in his hands. I got a 5-iron and a putter, and I'm out here just walking along, and he kicks your ass. And you're like, how did you do that? So amazing. How did they do that?
Oh, I mean, what's crazy is you can take that 1 to 2 clubs, and we used to do this when I was practicing, and we were playing at a par 3, and our coach would literally be like, you can take 3 clubs. One's a putter, and then, whatever else you got. But you learn to scramble from anywhere. I mean, I remember for the longest time, I changed my mentality altogether once, kind of situations changed. But I was the person, you never saw me pull out a pitching wedge or a lob wedge around a green. I had an 8-iron and I'd bump and run, and people thought I was crazy. But I could literally like barely bump it from here to halfway between me and you, and I'd let it run 15 feet. It's what you practice. It's the repetition. It's what you can get used to. It's how many odd situations can you put yourself in and figure out how to get out of it with that 5-iron, and whether you put it back in your stance, so you're going to hit a low screamer that, because you have a long way to go that you can't reach it, but you're going to make sure that it's going to skid an extra 75 yards, and they're going to be precise on the direction it's going to go every single time. It's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, it's just what they do. And I think some of it's a challenge too for them. It's like, how can I do this? And I mean, that's the fun of it.
I played with a guy that came up here from Florida once, and we went over to Golden Hills. And while he was here, I'll bet he played a dozen rounds over there. Mm-hmm. And he made the comment to me, he's like, there's no place to make up a stroke on there. This is not like a really hard course. But if you drop a stroke somewhere, you can't make it up easily.
It's not forgiving.
And I have found that to be the case as well. And after a while, I'm like, all right, this is not really even fun, but it's not the course's fault.
I mean, there's a couple places on Country Club of Lexington. There's like one of the shorter par 5s that if you get a good drive off and you can, put a 3-iron in your hand and rip it, that you might be able to make the green. You can make up a shot, or 1 or 2 par 3s depending on the pin location, even though sometimes those are hard.
9's kind of like that over there, but it's all uphill.
Exactly, and that's the challenge.
If you get a decent drive off and get a nice second shot, you can't see where it lands.
True.
But it's probably going to land okay.
And 10 at the same time, that kind of hard dog ride right, hard dog leg left over that little kind of gully down there. I mean, if you put yourself in a good position with your tee off, you're sitting there with like a pitching wedge in your hand. But then again, it's all about getting it out of your mind that there's a gully with a false front that runs down.
Yes.
And then where's that pin location? Because you got the bunkers right there too.
Well, it's the enticing thing of a couple of these. You get some guys up there with a little extra
I'm trying to go over the trees.
Testosterone.
Yeah.
Can't tell you how many times I've done that.
Those trees
Six
keep
is like
growing.
that.
That's the other thing too.
Number 6 in Lexington is like that as well.
That hard
you get up
dog leg
there,
left.
you're up that high, tee box, and you're like, this is going to fly for days.
Yeah.
I mean, the tops of those trees over there are the same level I am. I don't even have to get a lot of air time on these things. Yes, you do, my friend.
Once you hit it, you're like, it's not going to make it. It's not going to make it.
Done that so many times.
Yes.
And then, you get humbled because you try to avoid the trees, and then you find out, and that's just a par 4, and you find yourself so far away.
There's been several times that I remember I hit something good, and I didn't like, and I always played a fade, and I was a stereotypical, golfer, and I had this little fade going on, and sometimes I would set up to try to just really yank a draw out of it, on that hole, and it did not draw. It went straight, and I went straight through the fairway, and I'm sitting in the rough close to the tree line over there, and I'm like, well,
you're hoping there aren't any
crap.
snakes over there with you.
Exactly. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So I remember several times I got to the point I just teed off with a 3-wood right there. Like, okay, let's put it in the fairway.
Yeah,
okay?
I never had that discipline.
Let's put it in the fairway. And that was the cool thing too, is I was lucky. I actually, being a female playing golf, playing for college and playing for high school, I didn't. The girls' high school golf program that exists here right now. My husband's at Lexington as the athletic trainer. Lexington High School girls golf team is phenomenal. I was lucky. I was part of the early district team for 2 years myself, and Lauren Newton giving some other local shout out on there. But we were part of a girls district team. They didn't even have enough girls playing for just Lexington to have a team. I think we had somebody else from Pillion. We had me from Gilbert. So I was lucky we kind of had that district team that we played on. But that's when we played from the ladies' tees. But I actually really enjoyed when I played on the boys' golf team, because I didn't have another option. I either played boys' golf team or I played nothing. That we always played from further back. And I was lucky. I was not when I got to college, again, you figured out how much you are lacking when, your captain's flying where you land and she's 40 yards past you. But I still, relatively speaking, was a pretty long ball hitter the whole time I played. So I actually really enjoyed playing further back than I did playing closer up. People say that and they're like, are you crazy? And I'm like, have you ever gone to stand on the women's tees? Like, they shove you in some really crappy places on the women's tees. Like, you're shoved around some random corner and behind this. And I'm like, I kind of like playing farther back. But again, I was lucky. I had some strength and some distance that I could do that.
Well, and
too.
I think club technology has changed a little bit over time.
Yes. The shafts on the golf clubs are amazing. Oh my gosh. The flex that you can see in slow motion sometimes on these shafts, but how much they'll make up for it, it's phenomenal.
I I ran into this early on, and a friend of mine is a scratch golfer. At least he was at the time, and he was gonna show me the ropes. He was gonna kind of bring me up, and he was gonna train me, and he did a lot with it. And my game improved tremendously having him help me out. And he had a bunch of Hogan wedges, or Hogan irons rather.
Yeah.
And I had, I don't know, whatever I had from Kmart or something like that. It was nothing of any. He says, you need to get yourself a decent set of clubs. That'll help you. That'll give you a step up. Practice with them, yada, yada, yada. So he says, I don't care what you get, but get something that's decent. So I went to the local pro shop. This is down in Boca Raton, Florida. And so I'm looking for a used set of clubs. He goes, well, I got a couple sets over here. And he had a set of Hogan irons. And I'm like, well, those are familiar to me. I said, I think I hit those pretty well because I've been hitting my friends' clubs. And he said, no, you probably want these other ones. There's some Wilson irons over here. And I'm like, I don't know. So he said, tell you what. He said, take both sets, go to the range, hit a couple buckets of balls. Let me know how it works out. Because he's like, I'm going to sell you a set of clubs. I really don't care that much. And this was the Hogan Apex irons.
Okay.
And they're all, bladed heads, whatever. Yeah, I'm showing showing the time, the time distance between then and now. Anyway, so I'm like, sure, okay. So I got to the range, and I hit the Hogans better. Now, they're a really stiff shaft. Not the new graphite shafts that he wanted me. It's like, no, you should have these graphite shafts. I'm like, no, I'm going to hit these better, I think. So honestly, I did. And I hit those Hogans really nicely. And I bring it, so I come back and it's like, honestly, I said, I hit these Hogans better. He goes, well, okay, I'll sell them to you. In fact, I still have them. They're right over here. And so, then I needed some woods. And this is, when many woods were still made of wood.
Right.
Although at the time we were looking at buying some metal wood. So anyway, he's got a little canvas set up, a little practice tee there in the shop. He's like, all right, come over here, hit into the canvas, and we'll see, get you fitted for something there. And so I started hitting some things. He's like, oh, he goes, you have a nice swing. He goes, if I had that, I'd still be on the tour. I said, yeah, well, why am I still shooting 100? He goes, well, you probably suck around the greens. I said, yeah, well, yeah.
Fair enough.
But yeah, that was when, I didn't know anything about it. But it turns out that for me anyway, my the swing speed was just enough. I couldn't deal with that extra flex.
Yep. I always hit like steel shafted. Like all my irons, steel shaft. And then I had to get a more firm graphite shaft for all my woods and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm sure today I would want a more flexible shaft.
Yes.
I'd want the flex point up the shaft quite a bit. I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to be like some old guy down in Florida, just a little bit of a...
But you're right. It's the medical field and technology and golf, they both change at hyperspeed, man. It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing.
So did you pick out golf as something you wanted to do because you saw that as a way into school, or
the golfing going into school kind of came after the fact. So my father is a Lutheran minister, and here right in Lexington area, Newberry, and he was actually at a church in Lexington. And I originally started out playing softball, and one of his members, Red Douglas, came up one afternoon and said, "Has she ever picked up a golf club?" And my father was like, "No." And he's like, "She could play golf." And so lo and behold, like somehow he and I ended up catching up, and he handed me this golf club, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? And still to this day, I think there is something very distinct. You can tell I started out in softball. There is a special hitch that you can see probably in most people who started out with softball and then transition to golf with the way we rotate our hips with it. But sure enough, as soon as I picked up a golf club, I think what I liked about it is I liked softball to an extent, but at the same time, I figured out quickly, no matter how hard I played or how good I got, if nobody else actually gave the same effort I did, it didn't make a difference. We were always going to fall short. So when it came to golf, you can have golf as an individual sport because you're always trying to beat your best, beat the course, beat whatever it else is that you put forward. Whether it's, I want to be even par today on all the par threes because I've been struggling on par threes, or I want to beat my best score on this course, or whatever it is. But then you can also make it a team sport. So it gave me two different outlets to where I still had to carry my own on my own shoulders as an individual, but then you had that team component as well. And once I found golf and kind of found that, I was like, I'm interested in this. And again, I was not a typical country club kid, but luckily because family friend, hitting golf balls, and then got a job at the local golf course, so I had access to all the range balls I wanted. And then after certain times on days I wasn't working, when the members were basically done, you could walk, at the time you could walk however much you wanted, and you could typically get in at least 5, if not 9 holes if you walk pretty quick. So that's kind of how I got into it, which was great. And I was like, ooh, hey, I can get a scholarship and somewhat of this, and that's what I want to do. And that was the direction I went. So, yeah. I played volleyball in high school, too, and my volleyball coach actually played on the LPGA Tour for a little bit until she came back. And when she got off the LPGA Tour, she was a teacher in physical education, and now she's an assistant principal somewhere in the district as well if she hadn't retired. But, yeah.
So now you aspire to be the head distiller at some distillery making whiskeys or similar kinds of alcoholic products, and that seems like... Dog leg left? It
is a massive dog leg left, yes. So yeah, I do. I work for Holly Creek Distillery in my spare time, as I like to put it. So much spare time. So the owners, Craig and Meredith Amick, fantastic people. Craig is our head distiller. But yes, you catch me on certain days and I am completely in the production building, and we are dialing in the mash tun and dialing in the still and stirring fermentation tanks and doing anything else to do in the production building. The production building I love, honestly.
Why does that fascinate you? Why is that even attractive to you?
Yeah, well, that's talking about it, that's the hard labor stuff. I mean, you catch us on a certain day and we're lugging grain around and rolling barrels around and doing a lot of manual labor.
You can go to the gym for that.
I can, but this is a lot more fun. I like taking something in one form. You take your base grain, and it spends a day in a mash tun in which we add some, you have some enzymes and you have heat with that water, and all of a sudden you take it from one form to the end of the day it's in a slightly different form. And then I take it over and put it in a fermentation tank, and we're checking temperature, and then the next day we turn around and pitch yeast, and I get to manually agitate it in there, and 6 hours later I see this whole other chemical reaction happening. And then a couple days later we run it through the still, and I get to sit there and, we're talking about it, and we're like, yep, it's starting to get sweet. Now we're getting to the hearts. We're getting ready to make our cuts from our heads. We're starting to capture drinkable alcohol, which is always fun.
It's better than that previous stuff.
Yeah, it's better than that heads that comes out that's going to make you go blind, And so, yeah, you have this good drinkable alcohol that just, it smells fantastic. I mean, even just, White Dog, New Make Spirit, whatever you want to call it, the fragrance is phenomenal. And granted, you can turn around and make that into moonshine, flavored moonshine, whatever you want to make it. You might make gin or vodka as well. But then you turn around and you put it in a barrel, and then you have to be patient. And I have to admit, sometimes I have never been good at patient. But bourbon and whiskey has taught me to be patient, and I think that's the other thing. You sit there and you pray over those barrels, and heck, you pray over the entire job that you do, because this you want to make a good product that people like, and this is your livelihood, and you take pride in what you do, and you want to be good at it, and you're passionate about it.
Have you always liked cooking and baking at all? Have you always liked different wines?
Initially I got into wine when I was actually up at the University of Tennessee. One of our team physicians would travel a lot, so I would usually get done in November, December. She would be traveling with women's basketball, so I would house sit for her a lot because she had 2 dogs. So she would always stock the fridge and have a menu, and she was big into wine, and she would pair it with all the different wines. And that was kind of my introduction into wine. And then I started making wine at home a little bit early on, but always had an appreciation 4 different liquors. My dad drank bourbon and Scotch. My mom also was a huge Scotch and Irish whiskey fan. So growing up around some of those age things, and then my family in general, my dad's side of the family owned a furniture manufacturing business. So we made furniture from just the base wood. And so I think that's also what I love about the age stuff, is seeing the way different wood can change a product and the different smells that I remember from growing up being around, whether it was pine or poplar or cedar or, oak. Those different smells can remind me of that coming out of that.
So for you, there's some character in these things. There's
Yes.
there's some, I don't want to just say character, but there's some nuance in the personalities of different woods.
Yes.
And different things. And then there's also I want to create something. I'm going to take these base products
Yes.
and I'm going to create something different.
Right.
And then there's all that nuance of, I just went to the store to get a piece of wood because I just want to make a box. Well, do you want oak? Do you want pine? Why do you want poplar? Why do you want aspen?
Right.
Why do you want walnut? What are the advantages? Oh, you're going to make something, that's going to be long and narrow. The different fibers that are in the wood make a big difference.
Or is it something you want to stain? If you want to stain it, then you're not going to want a walnut because you want to take away from that deep, rich wood color that you would just clear coat. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Amazing.
then, not only that, not only have you decided that this is kind of a fun thing to do, you're getting into creating things.
Yeah.
So have you always been that creative part of you?
Yeah, the creative tinkery part of me has always been there. I think, honestly, that's what I find some of the most fun working in the medical field and doing what I do now is getting to work with engineers and tinker and redesign. But I did that when I was making wine at home, trying different things. I made a couple different Merlots that were finished with, you finish it with French oak and then you have a different wood finish as well, tinkering with those things like that. But yeah, you find that when you're dealing with this too, and it's different flavor profiles and different aromas. What can you bring in with different extracts or things like that? I think, and that's what makes it cool when I look around at everything you have here. Everything's a little different. And that's the thing is there's something out there for everybody. Right. I mean, some people come into the distillery and they try something and they're like, "Ooh, I don't like that." And they're like, "Oh, I'm really sorry." And we're like, "No, it's okay. We don't expect you to like everything we have on our bar. We want you to hopefully a couple things. That's the goal.
There's going to be a couple things that. So I had this experience with Jameson Irish whiskey. Mm-hmm. Everybody that's ever had any whiskey, you go to a bar, everybody has seen Jameson. Mm-hmm. So, I'm early in my bourbon journey or my whiskey journey. I get some Jameson. I'm like, it's okay. Mm-hmm. It's got whatever flavor it had, whatever profile it had, didn't stand out to me. I was traveling somewhere and we were at this hotel and I go to the bar and they have some Jameson and they had, I think they had the Buffalo Trace bourbon here. And I'm like, oh, I've been told the Buffalo Trace is really good, so I should try this because this is what's popular or whatever. So I said, well, give me a shot of the Buffalo Trace, but then I want some Jameson I'll have after that. So I tried the Buffalo Trace, and it was it's okay. Then I tried the Jameson. I'm like, wait a minute. This now tastes like candy to me. Just the contrast in flavors. And so for me, I got a musical background, I got an engineering background, in ones and zeros, everything is black or white to me in a lot of cases. Right. I'm very interested in, how did you get to this? What is the difference? So to me, it's fascinating, the different kind of wood that might be used, the different kind of grains that might be used, the temperature of the day, when you were doing the distillation, what temperature were the barrels in, what is, all kinds of stuff.
What did the barrels hold before?
Right. So see how, look at yourself. You're like, look at the big smile that comes along with this. You're fascinated by this kind of a thing. So how cool is it? You have your own gin that you developed.
Yeah.
This is your creation in a bottle.
It is, and I give Craig and Meredith kudos for that.
This is in my house.
Yes.
And I like this stuff.
I'm glad.
How cool is that?
It was awesome. I give tons of praise and appreciation to Craig and Meredith. They let me go out on a limb. And kind of create this. I have to admit, I early on, I think Craig and Meredith were both like, Jen, why Jen? And honestly, I I was never a big gin person, and then I went out there and I found a couple gins that I liked, and I was like, wow, this is different, and this would be cool. And I think I could make something that other people would enjoy too. And that kind of became the challenge. And then luckily, I think I kind of homed in on a couple things. And Craig and Meredith were willing to go out on a limb with me. And the Family Reserve series has given us an opportunity to have a lot of fun there. I think you're going to see a lot more really cool stuff coming out from that Family Reserve series. That's fun for us, and it's different. I mean, we make our staple products, and they're going to always be there. And hopefully continue to even develop those. But, to have an opportunity to create something that you might not see every day on our shelves, but it's fun and different and is something different for people that walk in is great. But yeah, this expression was a lot of fun for me. I had an opportunity to play with different botanicals. And, gin is one of those things, a lot of people have a bad gin story. And it depends. There's so many different gins out there, and gin has definitely evolved and developed over the last 15, 20 years from not just, traditional Beefeater or Old Tom's gin that's normally a little bit sweetened, but still really heavy juniper forward, to where now you find less juniper forward gins out there that focus on a lot of different botanicals. And then also you can have some fun with some of them, and a lot of them are playing now with different barrels. And I like that from a sustainability standpoint as well, because, barrels are a hot commodity in this business, especially in the United States with, always having, with bourbon, it's always got to be a brand new char. Well, sometimes those barrels are still in really great shape, and granted, a lot of barrels go overseas and go to other places to be reused, but how can we take advantage of that even here at Holly Creek Distillery?
So my gin story, when I was in college and drinking more than I should, somebody said, don't drink gin. It's not good for you. It'll rot your gut. Now, vodka was fine. Pretty much anything else was fine. But don't drink gin. Gin will be bad for you. So I said, okay. And I never drank gin. I think I had my first gin maybe like 2 years ago. And I didn't like it. I'm like, yeah, of course I don't like it. But I had some kind of exotic, whatever gin it was. And again, I didn't know what I was getting into. Mm-hmm. So you have that cognitive dissonance.
Right.
I would imagine you could take some of your sports psychology background and apply it to people to here's how you go into thinking about this.
Right.
This is what you're about. This is the experience you're about to have.
Right.
Or to say, be open to experience. Now, on the Big Five personality scale, I'm pretty open. I score pretty high in that openness to experience thing.
Right.
But I have to know what's coming. Because I'm also very high on the neuroticism scale.
Love it.
Yeah. So I have found it fascinating. But what is gin? So at a very basic level, what is gin, and how does that differ from vodka or moonshine, for example?
Right. So gin, typically your foundation is a neutral grain spirit, which is the same thing that your foundation for vodka is. So you take that super high proof spirit for the United States, that's been proofed to 190 proof or above in the States. So you have this very neutral spirit because it's been distilled so many times, you really don't retain too much of that base grain flavor.
Purely alcohol.
Right. And then you can, you infuse it somehow with these different botanical combinations, whatever they are. And for gin, typically you have to have predominant juniper in there, and juniper has to be present. That is a signature for gin. And then you can turn around and either redistill it or do a cold compounding method for infusing it. And, then you're still proofing it down to whatever your drinking proof is, the same way you do for vodka. The difference is you have those other, botanical esters and notes in gin. Is what
So
it
if
is.
I'm making a moonshine, what's the difference between a moonshine and a vodka?
So a lot of times moonshine is not distilled that high. You're never getting to that 190 proof or above for that. Typically it is distilled at a much lower proof, and that's why you're typically going to retain more of that grain flavor in it with that. So that's usually your biggest difference, is the number of times it's distilled.
So vodka then is, all right, so I have some Everclear, which is what, 95%,
Yes.
190 proof, I think
Yeah.
it is. We use that for making limoncello. We do make our own limoncello. We've got some orangecello
nice.
back here in the annals or in the archives back here. I don't know if we've tried to use that for making our own vanilla extract, but we do our own vanilla extract. We've had some fun with that kind of thing. But so what you're telling me is that for vodka, you're basically distilling this to mostly purely ethanol
Yes.
and then watering it down
Yep.
to get to your 80 proof. So it's only 40% alcohol. So it's 40%
Exactly.
alcohol, 40% whatever your water is.
Right.
And that gives you your difference from one vodka to the next. Mostly it's
True.
the difference then would be in the water.
Right. There's a lot of difference in the water. Now, granted, yes, you can do different base spirits. I mean, a lot of people traditionally associate vodka with being potato-based. But yet there's a ton of vodka that's coming out of Europe that was made with winter wheat, that's barley-based. There's some Finlandia is barley-based. Belvedere is rye-based. So there can be a lot of different bases, and I think you can still pick up on subtle nuances in still that base, even though it's stripped down so many times. But I do think truly it's the water that they put back into it that can give it some character too. And I think there's been several other things that I've read about that with different distilleries that are particular about the water and the reason they use certain waters because of flavor profile for vodka as well. And it's, again, for especially big places, it's the consistency. You want consistent product
So
with that.
that's very interesting because I know my wife, there are some vodkas she likes and there are some vodkas she doesn't like. And I don't know enough about the difference. All I know is when she says this is what she likes, that's what I buy.
Fair enough.
That said, I mean, I do notice some of the differences here and there. And when I've tried some vodkas, I'm like, well, yeah, that's not very good. But I'm not
Right.
interested in drinking vodka straight. I'm not going to sit here and sip a vodka.
It sure makes her usually.
Prior to a couple of years ago,
Right.
maybe prior to 6 months ago, I wouldn't sit here and sip a gin
Right.
either. All right, so your moonshines they're not distilled as many times or they're not distilled to as high
Yes.
level of alcohol versus what you might have for vodka.
Right.
Gin, I've done the same distilling as I might for vodka, but now I infuse other things into it to give it other flavors.
Exactly.
So it's not as influenced by the water, although you're still adding water to dilute it down to
You
an
are.
80 proof or 40% in most
Exactly.
cases.
Right.
But not all gin is at 40%, 80 proof. It could be all over the map.
It can be all. I mean, yeah, you see a lot. I mean, most gins range somewhere between 80 to right at 100. It just depends, kind of, and it's all about where do you want to drink it? Where does the master blender, the master distiller, whoever, where they think it tastes the best.
So do you
so
think
it
that
is.
gin has a wider palette for room for creativity than you might have like in a whiskey kind of a thing? Because like bourbon is very specific. I've got to have a certain amount of corn
Yeah.
in my mash bill, in the grains that I'm using. I've got to put it into the barrel at a certain proof.
You do.
It's got to have a certain kind of barrel. I got to char it. There's a lot of things that are prescribed.
You're true. I mean, there are certain regulations you have to meet when it comes to things with bourbon. But the one thing that's kind of cool about bourbon that you see a lot of it coming out now is a lot of distilleries are playing with different cask finishes, which gives them a lot of flexibility. You're seeing rum cask finish and port cask finish or sherry cask finish. So that gives you some of that flexibility for different uniqueness, I believe. There's some big distilleries, even up in Kentucky, that I know that I've read about them playing, the rock music with the deep bass to try to have more of that interaction for the rapid aging. Or, there's one distillery that's talking about they're actually going to let their barrels be, quote, more exposed to the elements. It's just going to be a covered building that has chain link around it. Somebody can get to the barrels. Does that actually help that? I think you're still going to see a lot more development in that in recent years. I think the different finishes using, like you said, rum cask or whatever can give it different profiles. I think all the different botanicals you can pull from to give you gin can make it very unique, and it literally gives you a completely different playground. There are some gins out there that are exceptionally complex with the amount of botanicals they put in there. I kept this one pretty simple because I believe a lot of people it's kind of like remembering a phone number. How many can you actually pick up on? Some people I think are better at picking up on a large plethora than others, but this one I kind of wanted to keep simple, but then also because we were taking advantage of the oak, I wanted to let the oak kind of speak for itself too.
So gin typically is not,
It's not
brown.
Right.
Typically
Yeah.
gin is clear.
There's a whole new wave out there of
So
barrel-aged gins.
you decided to put this into a barrel.
Yeah, I think that's my appreciation for wood and oak, yeah.
One of the things that I noticed, and I'm not noticing this now, and I mentioned this to you, a month ago or so. I'm like, this is almost soapy.
Yeah.
And I felt bad even to say that. I'm like, but it's not like soapy in a bad way.
Right. Yeah.
I had something recently, and I thought, remember following the janitor down the hallway, had that big polisher, he's polishing the concrete floor, and everything smelled clean? I'm like, that's what this reminds me of. Not this.
Right.
But what I was drinking that day. And I'm like, that's not a bad thing. I like clean floors.
Yeah.
But it was on the verge of being like cleaning products.
Right.
And but this was like, okay, I find more floral notes in this. Because yes, if I pick up a Beefeaters or any of your typical London dry gins, you're like
juniper.
It's like one flavor.
You got pine.
Right.
Like I get pine tree. It's juniper. It's right there.
Right. But then I have found like, oh, wait a minute. There's other things that people are starting to do with these things.
Right.
And then I found one that was aged in a barrel for a little while. And then you did this one.
Right.
Rested in a barrel rested gin.
Right.
And you have other botanicals in there. I won't ask you to reveal your secrets as to what
I think we put it on. I think we put it on the website, so it's not a big deal. So yeah.
But I'm like, okay, this is really fascinating. I could drink this.
Yeah.
I could drink this neat. I am drinking it, and I have drunk it neat.
Yeah.
But if you put it into various cocktails that take gin,
different.
like your last word, a very popular gin cocktail, it changes it just a little tiny bit.
Right.
And the idea that would play with the chartreuse in there, which itself is already filled with, 135,000 botanicals that the monks are putting in there.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute. But to me, this is what's interesting. And this is why I'm kind of curious if this is with you. I'm like, it's all these little nuances. I find this so fascinating.
Yes. You can change one thing and be completely different. And I like it too. I mean, you can coin Holly Creek Distillery a craft distillery. Most people do. I just call it, a small. We're truly a small operation distillery. We're a small batch. We're continuing to grow. We're continuing to push boundaries. But I think what makes that different is there's going to be small nuances different with every single small batch of our bourbon that we do. You're going to find a slightly different nuance, even if I use the exact same botanicals to the exact same ounce that I measure it out and we do the exact same process. It's going to be slightly different every time. But I think that's what gives it also some additional uniqueness. And there's a lot of possibilities. And I think the new age gin, or they call it Western style gin, with some of what we're doing with this as an example, toning back that juniper, but yet it's still present. Having those other botanicals in there and having some fun with the different finishes, I think that's only going to continue to allow gin to develop. And I heard somebody call it, this is not your dad or your granddad's gin. And I understand what they mean, because if you went in their liquor cabinet, you were going to find a Beefeater, a London dry style gin. This is something different.
This is wildly different.
Yes, and I think that's the point. And when I started developing this...
I've sometimes heard this kind of thing said, like for a bourbon drinker, this would be like an entry into gin.
Yes.
But I don't know if that's really the way I would describe it. But it is definitely, you would never think of sitting and sipping gin neat.
And
but
when I started this...
I would absolutely sit and drink neat.
Yes. And when I started this process, that was part of what I wanted to bring in, that oak influence, because again, I'm a whiskey drinker, predominantly with that. But when I brought this in, I've had the opportunity, unlike other people, to taste this before it got introduced to oak. And I love the way that oak really helps with the transitions and kind of smooths out the transitions between everything, and then still kind of brings in its own kind of unique presence with it. And yeah, it's kind of funny. my best friend from high school, she lives in Missouri, and she got a preview of this when I was still messing with it when she came to visit. And she's like, literally, it's like gin and a whiskey got together and they had a kid. And I'm like, well, yeah, kind of,
Right.
which is true. And it's its own unique thing. But yeah, I think gin can make a lot of progress in the next several years. It's made a ton of progress in 20 years. But at the same time, I think you're going to see whiskey doing the same thing because people are going to keep pushing boundaries and continue to be innovative within the confines they're given of their federal regulations.
So when does your career path?
Completely change. We'll see. I don't know. Hollow Creek Distillery is growing.
I don't
and it's the
imagine
best
you
part.
went into this thinking, oh, I just want to change careers.
I didn't.
You just said, like, this would be fun to do.
I didn't. So actually the way this came to be, I give my husband kudos. So Craig and Meredith Amick, they are the owners, like I said, of Hollow Creek Distillery. I was lucky enough to meet both of them in 7th grade. They were high school sweethearts. I think they got together.
Of course, they knew they were going to open a distillery
They knew
30
exactly,
years later.
probably. Yeah, both engineers. But yeah, I mean, I met them back then and have known them for a long time, lost contact. I found out when I moved back into the area, hey, there's a distillery a couple miles down my road. Like, oh, my husband and I decided to go hang out and check it out. And I walk in and I'm like, I know you two people. Like, what? And was a very good patron, liked a lot of the stuff. That's, before they even had the bourbon and this and that. And then later on, bourbon came to be one of those things. And kind of the way my happenings came to be is I saw one time that they were looking for an ambassador. But my schedule and life, and I had a little one at home. He's not so little anymore. That's what happens with
That
time.
happens. Yeah, it's
It's one of those things. But I was
amazing
like,
how we even got here.
I'm like, wait a minute, what year is it? But yeah, I turned around and I was like, wow, I would really love to do that because I love the products and I love the vision and I love all of this stuff. Time just won't allow it to happen. And then lo and behold, COVID hits. And I'm still working and things are different. And my husband, bless the man, I think he knew my passion for it. And God gave him a nudge. And it's one that I wouldn't have taken. And he reached out to Craig and Meredith and said, hey, my wife would really be interested in, some involvement with doing this, occasional helping out, whatever. Talk to her maybe next time she comes in. Well, he knew that I was probably coming in about a week later because we were going to go on vacation.
You're the introvert that we all...
Yeah, exactly. I'm until certain situations you can learn to be extroverted. But yeah, so I came walking in and Craig and Meredith started talking about me coming to help out on Saturdays and I was kind of like nodding.
Okay, yeah.
And then they were like, do you know what we're talking about? And I'm like,
No.
So anyway, I went back home and yes, bless my husband. He was phenomenal and fantastic, and I'm so glad that he did that. And now 3.5 years later, I've been working. And I don't think it was ever like one Saturday a month. I think when I got there, we were in the midst of making the second round of 8,000 gallons of hand sanitizer, and then still making product and bringing in the new still that we run, which is the hybrid style to this day, and piecing all that together and updating the bottling line. And a lot of it fed into what I loved. And luckily, Craig and Meredith were more than willing for me to be an extra set of hands there. And then it's just kind of evolved from there. And again, they're really good people to work for too. And
So it's still
added more
evolving. The
people
chapter
on.
is not finished.
No, it's not finished.
The story goes on.
That's right. It's not. So yeah, but they're awesome. And again, we did a Cabernet Sauvignon finished high cotton a couple years ago, and I was lucky that I kind of brought that up as an idea. And luckily, Meredith's a wine drinker like I am, so Craig let us bow out on a Thursday, go visit a winery in the upper part of the state, and we had a great conversation with those folks, and they were willing to say, yeah, let's swap barrels. So a couple weeks later we did that, and then Jen and now the Family Reserve, I think they have plenty of ideas about things they want to develop in the future, and then I'm asking for more mason jars from Meredith's house so I can keep tinkering and working on things for us to develop. So yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. But yeah, gin is special, and I appreciate that one for that reason.
Well, I have to say that my gin journey is reasonably short, but I'd run across some of these St. George's gins, and went, ooh, that's kind of interesting.
Right.
And it was right after that we were over there at Hollow Creek, and you were like, hey, I'm working on a gin.
Right.
You might want to try this. I'm like, well, that'll be interesting, so
Yeah,
I'll try it.
One of the prototype people.
You know,
yeah.
and I think, my wife and this another friend were about to walk out the door, and I'm
were.
like, hey, come back here.
They were about to walk
You
out.
might like this an awful lot. And what's funny is that the other friend, she had been over here when I had tried gins for the first time.
Yeah.
And turns out she liked the gins. And I think I ended up buying a bottle for her. And it might have been one of the Old Tom gins. I don't remember exactly what it was. But she really found that she really kind of likes that. And she's also a good, she likes wine drinking. So she likes all those different nuances and flavors.
Right.
And that to me is the fascinating part about this. I'm like, look at what you can do. And then, you just said, God nudged your husband to kind of do this. And I'm like, okay, so you grew up a preacher's daughter.
Yes.
In a Lutheran church.
Yes.
And, I grew up in a Presbyterian church. And then I moved here with a whole bunch of Baptists. And you find out that, what's the joke? How do you keep a Baptist from drinking your beer on a fishing trip? You take two Baptists. Because they can't see each other. You can't be seen drinking, but there's an awful lot of Baptists that I don't want to break any stereotypes for anybody, but let's just say that when there's no witnesses around, the Baptists will do it. But I find I don't have a problem, with alcohol, apparently. And if anybody's seeing the background,
They may have a clue. Yeah.
But that said, hey, Erin, here's to you, man. That's fantastic. Good job for you.
Appreciate it.
And the fact that it's only going to get better.
That's the hope. I mean, everything you do, you just want to keep improving.
10 years from now, you'll have done 5 different variations on these gins.
Probably. I already have plans. I already have another one I'm tinkering with a little bit, so we'll see if that one comes to fruition or something else. So, yeah.
So what was your thought process? You said, I want to do something a little bit different with gin, or I wanted to try something. There must have been something you said, oh, this is what I'd like to try.
Yeah.
What's different about this than any other gin that's out there?
Well, I mean, like I said, the biggest thing is I really dialed the juniper back. If you look at like the number of ounces per gallon, juniper is still the most predominant of that. But then I still focused on a couple of the different botanicals in there. I mean, coriander seed is usually your second runner when it comes to gin, and that stays true to this as well.
So is this part of the distillation process?
So,
or is this part of
It's part of the infusion with that, what I'm infusing into that high proof spirit, basically.
Now, when you're infusing it, are you infusing an extract, or are you infusing the coriander itself?
It's actually coriander.
Okay.
It's actually the juniper. There's also, I used a lot of citrus in there, so I used lemon peel and I used orange peel in there, and it's the actual, the actual peels. And then that's where I had kind of stopped it, because I wanted something. Gin is, if you look at the predominant sales of gin starts picking up in April, and it continues to grow until usually like June and July, and then it starts kind of tailing down August and September, and then it kind of dies off because it's more of your warm weather. It's your lighter drink. But I wanted to focus more on some of those fruitier notes in there with the citrus and the lemon, and then kind of let that juniper that has that little pine kind of cleany undertone kind of come in there. Coriander's more of like a peppery or an oaty taste, sometimes people will say. And I kind of was left wanting something else in the midst of making this. And then finally, kind of one of my last iterations, I wanted to add a little bit more of a floral note to it. And I was looking at angelica root, which is kind of unique, and you can find that in a lot of different things. And I tried other things. I tried star anise, but it was like way too overpowering, and I didn't like that, and I kind of pulled that back out. So when you're trying
these, how are you trying this? How does that work?
Small batch. So I had literally half-gallon jars that I had. So I had half-gallon jars that I had the high-proof spirit in, and that I would measure out everything based off of this is how much high-proof spirit I had, and we call it our tiny little drug scale, and that's literally what I was weighing everything out on. This is how many ounces of juniper, and I have a notebook with meticulous notes, and I have big X's through pages that were like and I'm bad.
This is no good.
Bad. And then there would be some that's like, okay, the nose was really good and this was good, but like this is what was lacking. And in regards to that, and that's how you kind of came to be. Like I said, I even tried some black pepper in there. We tried some cinnamon. We tried a bunch of other things in there, and it got to be too. Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, you get to the point that you just try. You're like, I'm missing this, and I want this note. So how do I get it? And you're like, nope, that's not how I want it. So you know, but then orris root. It was the one that came to be for the floral note in there, and I attribute that to my husband.
What is that?
So it's actually the root of the iris flower. So I give ode to Tennessee for that one and my husband, because literally I was sitting there one day looking at my book. That's CSS is a book that I look at a lot, and I was referencing things, and I was going through all these different botanicals and what I could try, and I turned around and I looked at it and I was like, orris root. And I was looking for inspiration, and honestly, God kind of laid it out for me. And I looked up orris root, and come to find out that iris is actually the state flower of Tennessee. And I took it as a sign, considering that's where I met my husband, and considering everything he did to hook me up with Holly Creek, other than just being a good customer. And so I got some orris root in and tried it, and I was like, there you go. And then that's kind of where it leveled out. And I decided to keep it simple, stupid, kind of, and then started messing with different, then once I got the base, I started messing with char versus toast, or a combination, and medium char, medium, like a 3 char versus a medium toast, or French oak versus, American white oak. And then that's when you kept trying it out. So, yeah.
Yeah, very cool. I like it a lot.
Just the things.
And as I say, I've put it into many cocktails.
Yes.
I haven't found a cocktail that it detracts from.
That's a great compliment so far, yeah.
But because some things would. I made something the other night, I made this cocktail the other night, and I put a little bit too much absinthe in it.
Yeah.
And it was just a little bit too overpowering. I'm like, all right, so less absinthe, maybe just work with the spritz.
Right.
Just to get that little bit of an absinthe hint on it, but
Yeah.
Don't let it overpower it. And that's tough to dial that kind of stuff in. Yeah. So that's what I imagine you'll be doing is,
right. And I had that problem with the star anise. Like when I put that in there, I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Like that was the only thing you got. And I was like, and even though it was a very minute amount, like I'm breaking off like a small piece, that I'm like, nope, we're not. So, yeah.
That's the kind of thing you might leave to the cocktail.
Yes.
You know what?
Yes.
Pour that in a little bit into the cocktail,
Exactly.
Maybe just a little spritz on the glass.
You can do that. Yeah.
That would be the better way to do it.
Without a doubt.
Erin, I think we've gotten to a great place to stop
That's
here.
Fantastic, yeah.
So, cheers to you once again.
Cheers.
Thanks for coming.
It's been a pleasure.